Hello. So we talk about working environment for the workers, the working environment. So that's the area that I specialize in. So I focus a lot on the environmental aspects. So I'm just going to pinpoint some the environmental factors that are important in this discussion, I think. Mr. Connie Chua was talking about the breaks for school cooks. I thought Dr. Park was going to work the slides for me as well, but so yes, these slides I think you can just refer to. In 2019, I did a research, and you can see that the workload on the weekend is twice as high on the weekdays for the hypermarket workers. I looked at about 5,000 pieces of data and segregated according to the days of the week and how the number of orders change. So you can see that there's Friday and also Mondays. So what this shows us is that because the orders are so high on Friday, that means that work on the weekend, on Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays will be huge. And when we see that on Monday also the order is so high, that means that they sold a lot of products during the weekend, which also means that the workers worked a lot on the weekend as well. So this is another way of approaching and providing evidence to the fact that the workload on the weekend is much higher than the weekday. Going on to this cafeteria, so Dr. Messing, I think, was emphasizing the fact that we need to be looking at the issue from the worker's perspective and from different shoes. I completely agree, and that's the approach that I also try to take. I think looking at this, the hypermarket workers from the perspective of weekday versus weekend. So from the consumer's perspective, you may think that, okay, it's open 24 hours. Great, I can go shopping at 2 a.m. That's the consumer's perspective. So being able to buy pork at 2 a.m. and sharing it with my family is my perspective, and I am not considering at all the conditions of the workers. So I think that's where we have to start. So there was a discussion about the chairs for the cashiers, and also there's the physicians in the hospitals, you have the lawyers in their offices. They don't stand up when they are having meetings with their clients or their patients, right? But when we come to the cashiers, we expect them to be standing. We expect the saleswomen in the department stores are expected to smile and be standing at all times. But when you go to the hospital, you don't expect the doctor to be sitting. And you know, when you go to the clinic, the doctor sometimes doesn't even look at you. So it's really the difference in the perspective of how we view a particular job. So we have to be standing in the shoes of the worker. And I think that's really important when we talk about rest breaks and the weekend versus the weekday. The second thing I'd like to talk about is about the school cafeteria or school kitchen workers, school cooks. So, you know, there was a question about the comparison between the different schools, what schools give better breaks than others. But when we think about the breaks or the rate, we tend to think about how many minutes. So the law says every 4 hours of work, the worker is eligible to get 30 minutes of break. That's what it says in the law, but it's not appropriate. We have to approach this number of hours from a different perspective. Also, the workers tend to think, okay, let's work really hard and then get a better break. I think that's also in the mindset of workers, but that's not a very good culture. If you go to a lot of the workplaces, you see that if you go to a auto factory, there's a conveyor belt and the workers are working at the assembly line. So the worker, can't really control the speed or the pace of the conveyor belt. But Korean workers want to work faster. It's a culture. So a worker wants to go faster than his or her colleague, work faster and quicker, and want to go to lunch earlier than his or her colleagues. It's a culture. So it's a very fast-paced working culture. So what I'm trying to talk about is that we need to focus on the density of the work or intensity of the work. So we talk about the school cooks, and one important aspect of a school cook is also the working environment and the intensity. So this is a typical schedule of a school cook, and for about 2 or 3 hours, they have to really, really work hard. If you've been to a school kitchen, especially at a hot summer day, they have huge bowls of iced water, which they have to constantly drink within 2 hours, because the work that they have to perform in 2 or 3 hours is so intense, it's unimaginable. So we say we give them 30 minutes per 4 hours. That's not adequate in this kind of situation. A break. Is it better to have short breaks frequently? More than just one long break? Yeah, the former type of break is better. So a lot of the employers think that, okay, we give them 30 minutes per 4 hours, I've done my job. But that's not really true. We have to think about the intensity of the work. And so I did a research about the maximum acceptable work time according to the maximum oxygen consumption and to look at the adequate amount of break. Another thing that we have to think about when it comes to school cooks is the working environment, and I wanted to look at the hidden aspect of a school cook. When we talk about heat-related diseases, we just think about the environment, the temperature, the humidity. But there are some other factors that we have to consider outside the environment. So for example, the obesity of the worker is also a very important factor when it comes to heat-related illness. So I'm wearing this jacket because I'm cold in this room. But there are some people in the room who are wearing short sleeves and they're okay. It's different for everyone. The temperature conditions are felt differently. So this is a typical school cook. But we all only talk about the room temperature. So this school cook is working in very harsh working condition. And if we just think about the environment, there are some measures being taken, but then if you look at it from a more personal perspective, it's different because we also have to look at the attire and what she is wearing. And so there are some research that have been performed regarding the heat stress exposure limits and how it has to be adjusted for clothing and the metabolic rate. So when we say it has to be adjusted for clothing and metabolic rate, we are saying that's what I was referring to, and I say that we have to look at it from a personal level as well, not just the environmental level. So these cooks are wearing this kind of attire. She will feel the heat differently compared to a person who's just wearing shorts and short sleeves. And so, so for example, you have research that say that we do have to make adjustments for clothing and other kind of conditions when we look at the heat stress exposure. Another issue is that in the regulations in Korea, a school kitchen is not designated to be a heated workplace. There is no oven per se. There is no hot melting pots like in a metallic factory, for example. There are no melting process of metal, which is why the school kitchens are not legally designated as a high temperature workplace. But if you actually measure the average temperature of a school kitchen, it's more than 30 degrees Celsius. And so school kitchens should be, in reality, should be designated as a hot temperature workplace. So more frequent breaks need to be given. But like I said before, we tend to focus a little bit more on the time of the break, but frequency of the break is also very important. Another thing is that everyone in this room is really contemplating and concerned about this kind of statement that when there is a worker, his or her case lacks epidemiological or scientific evidence. How are we going to overcome that? There was one case that we heard about when a father of a Charge syndrome child filed for workers' compensation. What are you going to do about the paternal side? Of course, there are some research in some cases that did have sufficient epidemiological evidence, but we still lack a lot of cases involving the father that have been recognized. It seems that in Canada, between 5 and 13 weeks of gestation, there is a holiday and leave given, but in Korea, according to the law, it's 45 days before and after pregnancy. I think we have to change that because the birth of the health of the fetus is decided in the first few weeks. We can't predict a pregnancy. But nonetheless, within 12 weeks, it's a very important period for the health of the fetus, especially radiation. How are we going to predict the timing? So I think we need to look at the Canadian case where you get maternal leave before pregnancy and also during the early gestation period. So, and in some cases, especially when it comes to exposure to certain chemicals, we have to allow the mother to get maternal leave in the early weeks of the pregnancy. So when I was preparing for today's symposium, I was thinking about what do we mean when we say equal work? We can think about wage equality. We can also talk about rest and breaks equality. But when we say that, we are just looking at the results. What's more important, going back to what I said before, is that we have to look from the worker's perspective to look at that person's work. I think the angle, the perspective is really important. Somebody before me has said that if our children were able to give more appreciation to the school cooks who cook them delicious school lunch, then it will be good. But you know that it's a saying that the mother's food is the best food. And so the parents, tell the school cooks to, cook everything from scratch. Don't use processed food. You should do all the work, the parents say. What kind of perspective is that? It's the perspective of a parent, of the individual. It's not the perspective of the worker. Only when we are able to stand in the shoes of the worker can we actually talk about equality. So I think that's the message that I would like to convey. Thank you.